Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Cue Cheesy Sound Effect.
Can you force it?
Today we are going to be looking at one of the alternatives to Infinite Sure Shot, and it is Super Hearts. Before we get into it, graphic, like, comment, subscribe, do the stuff, lives, weekends, noon Pacific time. Okay, let's talk about it. Your goal with the carousel. Hopefully you can get a tier on a super or a heart. That's the best possible scenario. Needlessly large rod. Second, I tend to go for item over champion. Your goal, of course, is going to be all the supers, all the hearts, and then you get one flex champion. For augments, you are looking for things like Axiom Arc, healing, first aid, anything that will help in that direction. Tome of Traits, emblems, you don't need them. You have all the champs you need in the game. You just need a little luck to get to the 6 hearts. But I've found it pretty reliable, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. This is one of those comps where you are going to be rolling a lot. You need to get to 3-star champions. That's how Supers gets its power. Your key items are your Sona items, which is Blue Buff, Hextech Gunblade, then a damage amplifier like Rabadon's Death Cap, Jeweled Gauntlet, or Archangel Staff. One thing with this comp, you are not going to use item holders. The reason is that you want to get up to 3-star champions, so unless you get a magnetic remover and can take items off, do not use Lulu or someone like that as an item holder because you are really hoping to get her up to 3 stars. Now, this is usually not a quick start build, so don't necessarily expect to win early, and don't get upset if you're not winning early. This build has a large power spike at 6 when you have the 4 hearts, 3 supers. Again, augments, first aid kit, excellent because Sona is going to be healing. Of course, you're going to need to get a Sona, and you're hoping to find her in and around stage 6 so she can join the team and then give you the 4 hearts and the 3 supers. Hero augments are usually not a major issue for this build as you have lots of choices at nearly every level. If you get 1s and 2s, you can use any of the supers or hearts who are 1s and 2s. Your 3 cost, you have Sona, and 4 cost, you have Viego, so you are pretty set in terms of your hero augments throughout the match. Your ultimate place will likely depend largely on how many 3-star champions you have, which is why this is about as true a hyper roll build as you can get, since you need to hyper roll and get those 3-star champions. As you get towards the end, you want to start filling your bench with champions that Syndra can fling in, such as Fiddlesticks, Urgot, Nunu. This is the end of game 1, and I was hoping to get a gold Lulu and had her on the bench. Syndra flung in a 1-star Lulu instead of the Nunu or Fiddlesticks, which really turned the tide of the fight, and we end up going out in 3rd place, but not a bad start. Game 2, let's jump straight to the augments. I am not a fan of Second Wind because the front line isn't particularly strong and might not last that long. So in this game, I rolled, got stuck with the true 2s, which could either be a huge boon or not. In this case, it's not, but we can use it to just roll as much as we can to try to get our supers and our hearts, and especially get them up to 3 stars. For Augment 2, in Game 2, we're going to get offered the Hero Augments. What you're really looking for at this level are the augments like this, the support ones. Lee Sin will give you additional attack speed. Malphite will give you healing when you cast abilities. Now, I'm hovering over the reroll, but I actually wanted to grab the Malphite, just left it on the screen a little bit longer so I could go through both of them for this video. And in this game, due to our augments and our 2 gold champions at this point, we're actually running pretty high in the standings, waiting on going into the 3rd augment. The one thing we're missing is the blue buff for Sona, which is going to be key. First aid, if you see it, it's most likely your best choice. You're still trying to get your items. Key, blue buff. Jeweled Gauntlet, Hextech Gunblade. Jeweled Gauntlet can be replaced with Rabadon's Death Cap or any other amplifier. You'd really like to get Sona to 3 stars, but she is somewhat competitive for your front line. Try to tank up your strongest champions as much as possible. Not necessarily that Pantheon is the strongest, but he is at gold 3-star level, and magic resist works really well on him. So if you can get some Dragon Claws on him and some anti-healing of Sunfire Cape on one of your key champions in the front, that is definitely a good way to go. Often I will use Lee Sin if I've gotten him up. In this case, he's only a lonely 1-star, so I'm not using him as a tank because I don't know how long it'll last. But you can see here, the team keeps powering up as it goes, and it allows you to have a lot of victories where you otherwise might not. This game looked really, really good for a while, but I was not able to get a Syndra until the very, very end. It still came down to a 1v1, but I had a 1-star Syndra and a 1-star Viego, which, while sufficient to get you solidly into the top 4, but not necessarily to win, although to climb in Hyper Roll, obviously you don't have to win, you just need to be in the top 4. So getting here is really important. Winning would be nice, but we would have needed a stronger Syndra and a stronger Viego to do it, but we go out in a respectable 2nd place. Game 3 augments started out with the hero augments, which can be really good or not. Nothing there that will fit. Nothing there that will fit. I'm not a huge fan of faster growth, and I'll explain why in a moment, but I end up taking it just in case I don't get one of the other augments that hit a heart or a super. Now, why don't I like that augment? It's a wording thing. Gain a Lulu. When you field her, she and allies holding an item gain 40 ability power. And it sounds to me like Lulu would gain the ability power even without an item, but that's not the case. She needs to also have an item to benefit from the ability power. Just doesn't sound that way. Now, before I totally take us into this next augment, I need you to understand the frame of mind I was coming into it with, and this is the basis for why I gave advice at the beginning not to do what I am about to do. I came into this game after the last game where I had a really hard time getting Syndra, which was the 6th heart. It then offered me a heart crest. And I know in my head I shouldn't need it, but I was just a little too tempted and didn't want the same thing to happen. So I picked up a heart crest to make sure I would be able to get to the 6 hearts even without Syndra. Now, if you do something like this, and I suggest you don't, but if you do, make sure you put it on someone who casts often. In this case, I chose Gangplank as he tends to cast pretty often. The way Heart works, each time they cast, you gain additional ability power. But you can see in this particular match, we're having a little bit of a hard time getting things together, although we're still up in the middle of the pack. But I've had to spread out items because that's giving them the 40 ability power, and I do not yet have the blue buff for Sona, which is key because she'll cast really often, which will increase your entire team's AP throughout the match. The final NPC was also not friendly for items. I don't have much hope for a blue buff. I go ahead and grab the portable forge, hoping I'm going to get a mana Zane, but that's not there. So I have a real problem when it comes to the core of this build at this point. I can now put Viego in and at least get up to the 6 heart, and then make a Spear of Sojin for Sona, which is certainly not optimal, but at least will do something. Now, what gave me hope in this game is despite not having optimal items or optimal champions or optimal augments, I was still able to get into the top 4. And while I wasn't necessarily competitive getting there, once you crack into the top 4, it's positive LP no matter what. 3rd game, 4th place. Game 4 really wanted me to divert from the plan. Infiniteam Crest would be almost a guaranteed win, but nope, we're going Thrill of the Hunt, which is one of the better augments for this because you're going to get that burst healing that's going to allow you to keep casting, keep gaining power, etc, etc. Thanks to an early Sona with a blue buff, we were out to a fast start in this one, and then get one of the more powerful augments, Jeweled Lotus, which if you see it, take it. This is a heavy spellcasting build, and having those being able to crit without the Jeweled Gauntlet, even better. Heading into the third augment, we are running in the middle of the pack. We get offered the Sona augment, which will give you an additional beam and 10 additional ability power. This is a fantastic augment for her, and as you can see, we are getting very close to a gold 3-star Sona, which is going to give you a lot of power. We're just going to have to wait to get that damage amplification item that we need to really make her work. This game came down to a 1v1 against a very strong team of Star Guardian spell slingers with Misfortune. This is a nasty combination to face, but we had a lot of 3-star champions and had ended up getting a heart emblem off one of the carousels. So that meant even more AP when we needed it. Syndra was flinging things in, and that put us in a position to win. We had actually been battling back and forth up until this point, but the moment I was able to 2-star the Fiddlesticks on my bench, the other person just decided, you know what, it ain't gonna happen, and it's GG with the first place. It is time for game number 5, and it starts out with Gary trying to tempt me into making a mistake from the beginning. There's a Heart Crest, comes with a Lee Sin. It's very tempting to do that because it will help you fast start this build. But it's not necessary. There are better augments out there, and luckily it gave me one of them in Celestial Blessing 2. For our second augment in this case, it is Hero Augments, which means at 3 cost, it's going to be our Sona augments. They're both pretty good, and you're going to have to make a game time decision. In this case, I went with Power Grid over the support augment simply because I didn't really have enough in the backline in terms of power to want to pump up their mana. If you've already got a really strong Lulu and you have your Sona items all together, you might want to consider the increased mana. Otherwise, I like going with Power Grid because it's going to help carry you forward. For the final augment, it was really 3 undesirables, but if you're met with a choice like this, go with Battle Mage, and that's simply because most of your comp is going to be frontline. That's where all your supers are going to be hanging out. It's usually just Sona, Lulu, and Syndra in the backline, so at least this won't go to waste. It will give them a little bit more armor and a little bit more power. Now this game had decided to scare me. I ended up with 4 and had to cling in for a long time, but I did get a Syndra, and she was able to start flinging things in that kept us alive. Urgot also provided absolutely critical CC, so when we went up against this brawler laser team, we were able to beat them, and then one of our ghosts was able to take out the other team, and so we wound up with a first place finish in our 5th and final game. So now, let's go over to the scoreboard. So we are looking, of course, at the super heart build, and you know how we do this. We add up the 5 games. So game 1, 3rd place. Game 2, 2nd place. Game 3 was a little wonky, but we still managed to squeak out 4th place. Game 4, we got 1st place, and game 5, we got extremely lucky and managed to get 1st place, although it could have been much worse. Now we add that up, which is 3 plus 2 plus 4 plus 1 plus 1. then divide all that by 5, and we get our force score of 2.2. This is not quite as insane as the Infiniteam Sure Shots, but it is a really refreshing alternative for people who are sick of grinding that. This is forcible. It's not always going to be in the top 4. You will fall out, but for the most part, it does really well. Please let me know if you want me to keep doing videos like this where we talk about forcing things. I hope you enjoyed this one, and as always, have an absolutely awesome day.